Today you will be taking the Grade 4, Module 3, Reading 1 Checkpoint Assessment. You will read passages and then respond to the multiple choice and open-ended questions that follow it. You may look back at the passage and make notes if you like, but you must bubble in your answers on your answer sheet in order for your response to be counted. You will have 45 minutes for this test. If you finish before the time is called, go back and check your answers carefully until time is called and you receive further instructions. Remember to read each passage carefully. You may refer back to the passages. Read each question carefully and think about your answer. Then choose or write the answer that you think is best. When you are supposed to write your answers, write them neatly and clearly in the space provided. If you finish the test early, you may check over your work until time is called. If you do not know the answer to a question, skip it and go on. You may return to it later if you have time. Remember the Ladies by Joan Barton Tarana. Excerpt from Letter by Abigail Adams. Wild colts make the best horses, said Reverend and Mrs. William Smith about their headstrong daughter Abigail. She was born in 1744 in Weymouth, Massachusetts. At a young age, she developed a love for reading. Nearing the age of 20, Abigail decided to marry John Adams, a struggling lawyer who was 9 years older than she. Her parents were not thrilled with her choice. They would have preferred a nice minister, but they gave their consent. Abigail and John moved to a farm in nearby Braintree. They managed the farm together. John built up his law practice, and Abigail cared for their growing family, which eventually included one daughter and 3 sons. Together, John and Abigail pored over articles in the Boston Gazette, eagerly following events in the growing struggle between the colonies and Great Britain. Abigail was fearful of the possibility of war, but she also believed that peace without freedom was not acceptable. She urged John to help lead a protest against the Stamp Act, which called for a tax on printed materials. The British responded to the protest by closing the law courts for a time. John and other lawyers were out of work. John left for Philadelphia in 1774 to take part in the First Continental Congress. For the next 10 years, John and Abigail would be apart for long periods of time. Abigail remained at home, managing the farm, family, and finances. The two exchanged hundreds of letters over the years, offering each other guidance and support. Abigail urged John and other delegates in Philadelphia to remember the ladies and not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. She was not pleased when John replied in a joking tone, suggesting that women were already the ones in charge. In 1788, John was elected vice president under President George Washington. He then became president. As the president's wife, Abigail helped John revise his speeches and letters, discussed ideas with him, and urged friends to write letters to the newspaper in support of his views. John's political enemies suggested that her influence was too great. They called her Mrs. President. Abigail denied such charges. In later years, Abigail kept busy caring for her family, home, and village. She had always given to her children and expected much from them, especially John Quincy. She would have been proud to know that he was elected president in the United States in 1824, but died of typhoid fever in 1818. Although Abigail Adams accepted that men's and women's roles in society were different, she believed that their talents should be combined for the good of all. She once wrote that women must be beyond the limits of drawing room and kitchen. It is interesting to think she might have done if she had lived today. Excerpt from Letter by Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams wrote this paragraph in a letter dated March 31st, 1776. She sent the letter to her husband, John. At that time, John Adams and other members of the Continental Congress were planning to declare American independence from England. They wanted to start a new country, the United States of America. I long to hear that you have declared an independency. And, by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to these ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. Question 1, Part A. What organizational structure does the author use in Remember the Ladies? A. Chronological order. B. Problem and solution. C. Compare and contrast. Or D. Cause and effect. Question 2, Part B. Select the sentence that provides an example to support your answer in Part A. A. Wild colts make the best horses, said Reverend and Mrs. William Smith about their headstrong daughter Abigail. Paragraph 1. B. For the next 10 years, John and Abigail would be apart for long periods of time. Paragraph 5. C. Abigail Adams accepted that men's and women's roles in society were different. Paragraph 8. Or D. She once wrote that women must move beyond the limits of drawing room and kitchen. Paragraph 8. Question 3, Part A. Which statement correctly contrasts Remember the Ladies, an excerpt from the letter by Abigail Adams? A. Only Remember the Ladies is written by someone who was an eyewitness to the events being described. B. Only excerpt from letter by Abigail Adams includes observations about the roles of men and women in society. C. Remember the Ladies is told from the point of view of someone who knew Abigail Adams, while excerpt from the letter is told by Abigail herself. Or D. Excerpt from the letter by Abigail Adams is a first-hand account of Abigail's ideas, while Remember the Ladies is a second-hand account. Number 4, Part B. Which of Abigail Adams' beliefs is expressed in excerpt from letter by Abigail Adams, but not in Remember the Ladies? A. Men and women play different roles in society. B. Women will rebel if men do not treat them fairly. C. Children who are given much should achieve much. Or D. People should be able to marry whomever they want. Question 5. You have read 2 passages about Abigail Adams, Remember the Ladies, an excerpt from letter by Abigail Adams. What specific information about Abigail Adams do both passages provide readers? Cite evidence from both passages to support your answer.